Yo, what's going on, YouTube, and welcome back to Goal Line Hockey. It's your boy, Kevin Forte, and we are continuing the season preview series today as we take a look at your Vegas Golden Knights. So, the Vegas Golden Knights, the theme of this summer was two big things. Three big things. One, they let go of Marc Andre Fleury. I know. We're going to skip that one because that was not a good moment for the Golden Knights this summer. The whole Marc Andre Fleury thing, I have to preface that. The second big thing was figuring out centers. They needed more center depth. And listen, I love Chandler Stevenson when he was in Washington. He was a good player. But you can't rely on William Karlsson and Chandler Stevenson against these giga teams they're playing against. And not even giga teams like the Montreal Canadiens. The Canadiens have good center depth. Absolutely. It was better than the Golden Knights. But they needed to address that. And they needed to find just more depth in the forward chart to begin with. Because you started to see guys like Tuch, Karlsson, Stone shut down in that series against the Montreal Canadiens. They were tired. They were playing a lot of hockey throughout that playoff run and even earlier in the playoff bubble in 2020. So this was a team that was definitely a little bit tired. So it was important that they added guys to the lineup to maybe help spread the wealth in terms of minutes played per game. We saw the Golden Knights do all of that. So looking at their top point producers last season, it was Mark Stone, the captain, 61 points last season. And right behind him, Max Pacioretty, 51 points. You also saw some guys like Marchessault, Shea Theodore. I loved him in Anaheim. William Karlsson, Chandler Stevenson, Alex Tuch, Alec Martinez, Riley Smith, Alex Pietrangelo, Tomas Nosek, Nick Hague, William Carrier. That is your top point producers last season for the Knights. Now looking at some of the guys that they lost last season, Cody Glass, they traded Cody Glass to the Nashville Predators in a three-way trade between the Philadelphia Flyers, the Nashville Predators, and the Vegas Golden Knights. Now, Cody Glass was the key piece going out of Vegas. He is now a member of the Predators, but they did replace him. And once we get to some of the additions, we'll get to that. So Cody Glass is out. Ryan Reeves traded to the Big Apple, to the New York Rangers. The Rangers have their own issues with their culture, and they definitely got a lot bigger this year. And I talked about that in my season preview series for the Rangers and how Ryan Reeves is going to help with the Rangers. So Ryan Reeves is gone. But they're hoping that a guy like Kale, or what's his name, Keegan Colasar, can kind of take that role a little bit from what Ryan Reeves has done. Nick Hauden was traded to the Ottawa Senators, a part of the Evgeny Dadanov trade, which I'll get to that when we look at our additions. But Nick Hauden also off the books. They're going to rely on some of the younger guys like Zach Whitecloud to kind of take minutes on the blue line. So Nick Hauden is out as well. And Marc Andre Fleury is traded. And he really wasn't traded. He was just let go to Chicago because the guy they traded for from the Chicago Blackhawks has now had his contract bought out or terminated or something like that. So, they got him for absolutely nothing. And I think a lot of Golden Knights fans are a little bit crushed that Flower will not be in the Sin City to start the 2021-22 season. But no need to fret. Robin Leonard is a very good goaltender, a great dude also, and he is a good replacement to Fleury. I think it's just the way things ended was a little bit harsh by the Golden Knights, but that's the hockey business, right? So now looking at some of the guys they brought in. Nolan Patrick, the former second overall pick back in the 2018 NHL draft. He was drafted by the WHL Brandon Wheat Kings as a really talented player to the Flyers and just never developed into that big, elite power forward. And I think the Vegas Golden Knights are having the expectation that he can become that. I mean, you look at what Cody Glass was. They pretty much traded Cody Glass for Nolan Patrick. Obviously, Ellis going to Philly, but that was part of the deal. But Nolan Patrick coming to Vegas, they're hoping that he could jump in as a potential middle six, maybe even a top six center behind Karlsson. And he's going to get opportunities to do that this year. And I think the expectation is that he can fill out the voids that they need on their forward core, especially down the middle. Nolan Patrick is a big dude, maybe even a little bit of a replacement to Reeves in that sense, that he brings that little bit of sandpaper to the lineup, and he could hopefully contribute to the team on a cheaper deal, which is part of the equation. They also brought in Evgeny Dadanov from the Ottawa Senators. Like I mentioned, Nick Hauden going to Ottawa. Evgeny Dadanov, I don't know how long he's actually going to be in Vegas. This seems like kind of a a Tomas Tatar situation where he's there and then they send him out kind of thing. But Evgeny Dadanov comes in as some depth. He didn't have a great season in Ottawa last year. It seemed like that was going to be a good fit, and it didn't. It fell flat on the face of the Senators, and Pierre Dorion was able to move him, and they were able to bring in some depth on defense and also a couple draft picks. That's the name of the game for the Senators. They also brought in from the Rangers as well in a separate trade with Ryan Reeves. They also brought in Brett Hauden earlier this summer, and that was one of the moves where we said, yeah, they're looking to add center depth. They just said that in a press conference. Kelly McCrimmon was mentioning that. So it was pretty clear that the Brett Hauden thing was they needed to bring in more center depth. So they bring in Nolan Patrick and Brett Hauden to fill up those voids, and especially losing guys like Tomas Nosek, and Cody Glass, you need to fill those voids, and they did that with Nolan Patrick and Brett Hauden. They also brought in new goaltender Laurent Brossoit from the Winnipeg Jets. Not only does he have a great name, but he was a really good goaltender behind Connor Hellebuyck last season. I think he's going to be in a similar role this year under Pete DeBoer and the Vegas Golden Knights behind Robin Lehner. So Robin Lehner will get the majority of the starts. I wouldn't be surprised if he got like 55, 60 starts, and you see Laurent Brossoit. You may even see that balance out a little bit more. It may even be 50-30 or even 45-35, something like that, because Laurent Brossoit can play in games, and I think he's a gamer, he's a good goaltender, and I think that's a nice addition to the Golden Knights in between the pipes. Again, not Marc Andre Fleury, but he is a good goalie, and they picked him up in free agency. One of the few moves they really made in free agency was more about re-signing guys like Martinez and Janmark this summer for the Knights, more so than actually acquiring guys in free agency. Like, you can't have Alex Pietrangelo every single year. That just doesn't happen. All right, so with that said, let's take a look at the lineup for the Golden Knights. You look at their forward group. Max Pacioretty, Chandler Stevenson, and Mark Stone are your first line. Chandler Stevenson as your first line center, I don't see that happening. I think it will be William Karlsson or potentially even Nolan Patrick. But as of right now, that is your first line. Jonathan Marchessault, William Karlsson, and Riley Smith is listed as your second line. I think that is pretty spot on. And then in the bottom six, you got Matthias Janmark, Nolan Patrick, and Evgeny Dadanov. The only guy that I could see really moving up there is Nolan Patrick if he becomes, a replacement to Stevenson on that top line, or if more than likely a second line center. It'll be between Stevenson and Patrick for that second line center spot behind Karlsson. Now, looking at the fourth line, you got Brett Hauden, who they acquired, Nicholas Waugh, and William Carrier. A pretty solid fourth line. It's nothing really crazy, but you got some guys in there that can play, and I think they're nice additions. I really like Hauden and Patrick. And like I said, Dadanov may just add some more scoring depth, which you don't rely on the top six so much, and I think that's really why they brought him in. So it does make sense to an extent. Now, looking at their defense, like I said, it's not too much change. The only real guy they lost here was Nick Hague. I mean, not Nick Hague. Nick Hauden. And you look at their top pair, same as last year. Martinez and Pietrangelo, that will stay the same. Brady McNabb and Shea Theodore also returning for the Golden Knights. Really good top four there. And then you got a little bit of a different look in the bottom, in the third pairing. You have Nick Hague and Zach Whitecloud. Now, we saw those guys in spades last season, but they're definitely going to have more of a prominent role this season as Zach Whitecloud maybe looking to take a spot in that top four at some point. He's a really talented he has a lot of potential. I don't know if he's going to beat out Theodore or Pietrangelo on the right side, but he may have a chance to eventually beat out a guy like Martinez or McNabb on the left side. And you could say the same thing about Nick Hague, a big defenseman. I like Nick Hague. He just has to continue to work on his skating and his scoring production, which that's not really what he's there for. He's more of a shutdown defenseman, but I like Nick Hague there alongside Whitecloud. Whitecloud will be the puck-moving defenseman on that tandem, and Nick Hague will be the shutdown guy. I like that a lot. And then the goaltending, like I mentioned, Robin Lehner and Laurent Brossoit. You got to like that. I think that's a really nice tandem. And then looking at their forward and defensive depth. So looking at the forwards, you got guys like Jack Duggan, who we've been waiting to kind of see what he becomes. You also have guys like Sven Berchi, who you may have heard of that name before. He was bouncing around Vancouver and Edmonton for a little, Vancouver and Calgary for a little while. Gage Quinney, Patrick Brown, Berchi, like I mentioned. Jake Leschyshyn, Peyton Krebs. That's a big one. I expect him to maybe jump into that lineup. He may even take a spot potentially on that third line. Now, that's the thing. you see this situation around the league, I think in Philadelphia, with a guy like Morgan Frost, where he's not a fourth-line player, but with the depth that they have, he does become that. So if Peyton Krebs doesn't play on the third line this year, I could see him go back to the AHL. But don't be surprised if in training camp, you kind of see a Nils Höglander effect with a guy like Peyton Krebs. He may creep into that top 6 if he has a really good training camp. Now, defense, things definitely get a little bit interesting because you've got guys like Jake Bischoff, who was an Islander draft pick, Minnesota Duluth defenseman. I don't see him making the lineup. He's more of a guy you'll see with the Silver Knights and Henderson. But you also have guys like Caden Korzak, we saw a little bit last season, Braden Paquel, Lucas Cormier. I don't really see any of those guys making too big of an impact. But if you're going to see anybody jump into the starting roster, it will probably be Jake Bischoff or Caden Korzak. Other than that, nothing too crazy there. They have no cap space left. They've used it all. $81.5 million spent by Kelly McCrimmon and the Golden Knights. So they're maxed out. They have their first and second round picks for the next 3 years. So might need that at the trade deadline. If you want to add, they can definitely do that. All right, so with that said, the big question we got to get to. Are the Vegas Golden Knights a playoff team in 2022? And that's pretty easy on this one. I believe in that Pacific Division, they are the team to beat. With that said, there is going to be a little bit of competition as we see a new team in Seattle replacing Arizona. Again, no discredit to Arizona, but I think Seattle will be better than the Arizona Coyotes. So in that Pacific Division, you kind of a tough trade there for the teams in the Pacific, so it got a little bit better. I think Edmonton, you could argue, got better this summer. Vancouver, I think, is going to have a bounce-back year. And there's some of those tweener teams, and I think those teams like Calgary, maybe even LA, they're going to be in the mix. And I think teams like San Jose and Anaheim stay at the bottom. And as long as Vegas can beat those teams, I think they will be that top team once again in the Pacific Division. And they don't have to worry about a team like Colorado or Minnesota this year. It's going to be them and them only at the top of this division. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. Do you agree with me that the Golden Knights get an easy spot in the playoffs as that team in the Pacific Division in 2022? Or do you think there'll be some competition and maybe they miss the playoffs? Let me know your thoughts down below. Guys, as always, thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you guys next time.